A piece of coal was worth hundreds of billions. Everyone rushed to buy it. By offering a box of instant noodles as a wedding gift, the Miss World would immediately agree to marry you. However, Han Feng refused to sell it. The reason was that after just one night, the global temperature dropped to -50 degrees. Most people either died from the cold or starved to death. At that point, a single piece of coal could buy the tallest tower in Dubai. Yet, Han Feng had awakened a superpower that allowed him to create unlimited resources. Not only could he transform a soybean into a tree, but he could also merge soybeans with meat, creating a massive piece of meat even larger than before. Even if the fusion failed, it would turn into coal. This ability solved many of the problems Han Feng faced during the apocalypse. However, in his past life, Han Feng wasn't so fortunate. Being a fool for women, he would rather starve than not give all his food to a bad girl. But instead of thanking him, she teamed up with another man to harm Han Feng. Then, they seized his house and supplies. However, after Han Feng died, he unexpectedly reincarnated. Even more surprising, it was only half a month before the apocalypse. Then, he noticed a red light emanating from his hand. At first, he thought he was hallucinating. But no matter how much he waved his hand, the red light didn't disappear. Suddenly, he sneezed, and the red light turned green. Not only that, but the light fluctuated in intensity. He wasn't sure if the green light was the cause, but he felt incredibly comfortable. So, he opened the fridge to find some food to replenish his energy. But there was nothing inside. He then noticed the soybeans beside him, which he had bought before the apocalypse hit. First, he needed to eat something to fill his stomach, and then he would go to the supermarket for more food. Using his hand that emitted green light, he threw a soybean into his mouth. To his surprise, the soybean exploded. After the smoke cleared, he saw that the soybean had turned into a plant. At that moment, he couldn't believe it. Had the soybean really turned into a plant? The fatigue he had felt earlier began to dissipate, and the green light on his hand vanished. He took out another soybean. Indeed, it was still just a soybean. Han Feng was confused, but he didn't dare to confirm that this was his new ability. It was truly an astonishing discovery. However, what mattered most to him now was stockpiling supplies before the apocalypse struck. Outside, the street was bustling. As Han Feng walked, he reflected on his newfound abilities. Suddenly, a familiar figure appeared, the shuffled card from his past life who had betrayed him. She greeted him with a fake, overly friendly smile. Han Feng was stunned. Li Wei Na. In his past life, Han Feng had done everything to fulfill her every request. But as everyone knows, the fate of those who are foolish for women is tragic. The more he thought about it, the angrier he became. Although he had known he was just her backup, he never expected her to harm him like that. However, this wasn't the time for revenge. Han Feng needed to prioritize stockpiling supplies. When Li Wei Na noticed his silence, she asked why he wasn't responding. Han Feng simply smiled and explained that he had been distracted by her, causing him to lose focus for a moment. Li Wei Na smiled brightly, but then a sly, mischievous grin appeared on her face. She suggested that Han Feng accompany her for a shopping trip. However, Han Feng politely declined and slowly walked past her. Li Wei Na was taken aback by his response. Han Feng knew that she only wanted him to follow her so she could buy things for herself. But this time, he wasn't naive enough to let her treat him like an ATM. It didn't take long for them to reach the largest supermarket in the area. Han Feng recalled that when the global ice age hit, all the supplies from this supermarket had mysteriously vanished. No one knew who was responsible. Now, he had to gather as many supplies as possible before the apocalypse fully hit. He began making a list of essential items, food, medicine, and tools. However, his bank account was nearly empty. If things continued like this, he'd be in serious trouble. Just then, his phone buzzed. It was a notification from a loan app. Han Feng had an idea. He and his grandfather quickly downloaded several loan apps. After all, during the apocalypse, no one would be coming around to ask for money. Li Wei Na, frustrated after being rejected by Han Feng, couldn't understand why he, someone who typically acted impulsively, would turn her down. At that moment, a car pulled up beside her. To her surprise, it was Han Feng. He had borrowed money and used the remaining funds to buy a car. Li Wei Na was shocked to see him with a car. She asked if he had just bought it, and Han Feng confirmed. He even said, "My father went abroad for work and earned a good amount, so he gave me some of it. I just saw him off at the airport." Li Wei Na paused for a moment, then began to play her part. So, you were busy seeing off your father? I didn't know that, and I even asked you to go shopping with me. I'm so sorry, she pretended to tear up. I thought you were being cold and leaving me all alone. Oh no, Han Feng couldn't help but chuckle at her performance. He then pulled her closer. Silly girl, how could I ever leave the most important person in my life behind? Li Wei Na seemed to have achieved her goal. She once again asked Han Feng to go shopping. But when she looked up, he had already started walking away. Han Feng, carrying his items, said, I need to move all this stuff upstairs. I'm really busy. Li Wei Na was frustrated but still managed to ask, why did you buy so many things? Han Feng casually replied, I bought them because I wanted to. He even added a little white lie, saying the purchases were gifts for her. Hearing this, Li Wei Na said, well, I'll wait for you. I'm going home now. Okay, wait for me at home. Han Feng responded. As Li Wei Na walked away, she thought to herself that Han Feng was now in her control. Meanwhile, Han Feng was thinking about how he couldn't let her know that he was secretly stockpiling supplies. As he carried his things, darker thoughts ran through his mind. These supplies were essential for his survival in the coming apocalypse. As for the debt he owed Li Wei Na, he would deal with that later. Han Feng couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation for the impending disaster. The next morning, the radio broadcasted a weather forecast. Snow had begun falling, and the temperature was expected to drop to -20 degrees Celsius. Han Feng, still busy with his stockpiling efforts, knew that it wouldn't be long before the entire world was covered in ice and snow. That's why he not only had to gather enough supplies but also had to seal the containers to prevent others from being curious. Before long, the warehouse was filled with supplies. Han Feng was exhausted, especially since some of the more sensitive materials had to be transported during the night. The power supply system during the apocalypse was unreliable. As a result, Han Feng built a generator and stockpiled enough energy to last a year. He also reinforced the house to make sure it was secure. In addition, he renovated the heating system. By now, the supply room was fully stocked with all the essentials. Just as Han Feng finished gathering his supplies, the apocalypse was about to hit. Only one day remained before the temperature began to steadily drop. After making a list of tasks to complete, one crucial task remained. Han Feng knew that the supplies he had gathered wouldn't be enough to survive the impending ice age. He needed to figure out how to control his superpower, the ability to turn soybeans into plants, if he hoped to survive. On the table in front of him, there was a plate of soybeans that he had previously created using his ability. However, this power had appeared randomly, and Han Feng wasn't sure how to activate it consistently. He decided to test whether the soybeans were edible. Just a few minutes later, the plate was empty. It turned out that they were indeed edible. This meant that with this power, Han Feng could potentially create food during the apocalypse. The next step was for him to master both the red and green abilities. Han Feng went to the refrigerator to grab another item. He had only tested the soybeans so far, and now he needed to see how his power interacted with other types of food. Soon, evening arrived. At this point, he and his grandfather had tested the superpower so intensely that they were about to collapse. It seemed that using the ability too much had put a strain on both their bodies and minds. However, Han Feng had started to understand part of how the green power worked. He had tested it with various foods, but none had shown any reaction. Some foods, like the soybeans, transformed from seeds into small plants. Others exploded and turned into lumps of black material resembling charcoal. But even these lumps of charcoal could be used for warmth. Han Feng continued to test the power over and over, but each attempt ended in failure. He then focused his mind and adjusted his breathing. Sure enough, a vegetable resembling broccoli appeared. However, Han Feng had to admit that the success rate was very low. He still didn't fully understand the exact principles behind the ability. There must be some kind of rule or logic to how it worked. At least now, Han Feng had figured out the conditions necessary to activate the ability. The key was in his own consciousness. He had to imagine himself being in nature and merge with it as if he were part of it. Sure enough, the green light appeared, confirming that the ability was connected to his consciousness. This time, instead of using plants, Han Feng decided to test the power with meat. After a while, there was still no reaction. It seemed that the ability only responded to plants. Han Feng felt a little disappointed but remained hopeful, believing that persistence might eventually lead to success. Suddenly, he felt both the red and green energies surging inside him. He decided to try activating the red light. As expected, the red light appeared immediately. However, the piece of meat in his hand quickly transformed into something unrecognizable. Han Feng, startled, quickly dropped it onto the floor. Han Feng picked it up again and noticed that the meat had reacted to the red light. However, it seemed like the only effect was that the meat had been heated. He thought for a moment. Could it be that the red light's ability was only for heating? After further analysis, he realized it wasn't just heating. The meat seemed to be undergoing a process similar to material decomposition. It almost sounded like something out of quantum physics. Suddenly, Han Feng had an idea. He grabbed a handful of soybeans and wondered what would happen if he combined both abilities with two different materials. One ability was for material decomposition, and the other for material evolution. When the reaction occurred, Han Feng's mouth dropped open. The small piece of meat had expanded into something at least 10 times its original size. The soybeans in his hand had disappeared. Had they merged with the meat, causing it to grow? He closely examined the meat and noticed that it looked fresh and normal. Just like any regular piece of meat. Excitedly repeated the experiment. But, as expected, most of the attempts failed. Everything else turned into lumps of charcoal, leaving them both feeling defeated. However, Han Feng knew that it was simply a matter of figuring out what went wrong. He decided to keep experimenting. Despite the failures, he felt that he had made some progress today. If he kept studying his abilities, everything would eventually work out. He even imagined himself mastering the apocalypse, standing at the top of it all. But just as Han Feng was about to get excited, he suddenly remembered that he hadn't prepared any weapons. He quickly realized that he needed to gather all his supplies and find some gear. Surviving the apocalypse without weapons would be difficult. But where could he find them? Soon, night fell. As Han Feng walked down the street, he thought about where to buy weapons. He had no idea where to get them. Suddenly, a voice interrupted his thoughts. I'm working on a construction project here. I've invested thousands in it. Han Feng turned to see a man behind him bragging. Do you know the heir of the West Harbor conglomerate? Old Song is my big brother. Han Feng immediately recognized the man. Everyone in the area called him the thug. Li, also known as Li Jia, lived in the same neighborhood as Han Feng. It was rumored that he helped people secure construction contracts in exchange for some extra earnings. At that moment, one of Li Jia's underlings was offering him a cigarette. Li Jia politely declined, saying that he preferred smoking high-quality cigarettes, as the cheaper ones didn't satisfy him. Despite not having an official job, Li Jia always acted as if he were very busy and important. Han Feng thought that if he needed a source for firearms, Li Jia might be able to help. So, he decided to approach him and greet him. Li Jia asked Han Feng if they knew each other. Han Feng replied politely, Mr. Li, we've met before, don't you remember? Li Jia responded, Oh, I've been so busy with work lately. I must have forgotten. Han Feng then leaned in and whispered in Li Jia's ear. Upon hearing this, Li Jia was taken aback and asked Han Feng what he needed the items for. Han Feng was momentarily unsure how to respond. Li Jia then became serious and warned him that storing such items was illegal. However, he reassured Han Feng that, despite knowing, he wouldn't report him. He also cautioned that it could bring trouble for Han Feng in the future. Han Feng explained that he had some past grievances, which was why he needed the items for self-defense. He told a rather emotional story. He had been riding his bike when an older man spat on the ground. And unfortunately, some of it landed on Han Feng's face. When Han Feng confronted him, the man spat again. That was when Han Feng decided to teach him a lesson. But before leaving, the man swore revenge. Soon after, a group of thugs appeared, sent by the older man, to take care of Han Feng. Han Feng, feeling frustrated, said, I've never been humiliated like that before. That's why I need the weapons for protection. Li Jia seemed to believe him but was still skeptical. He thought, how could something like that really happen? Han Feng could tell that Li Jia was skeptical but decided to help him anyway. Li Jia then agreed to assist him and invited Han Feng to go with him. He even offered to drive Han Feng, mentioning that his sports car was in the shop. Han Feng, noticing that Li Jia seemed wealthy, agreed to take his car, as the snowstorm was heavy and his own car wouldn't do well in such conditions. Soon after, they were on the road. Li Jia was surprised to see that Han Feng, so young, could afford a car worth tens of millions. Li Jia quickly took a few pictures for social media but complained about the ride. This SUV is too stiff. I think I prefer my sports car, he said. They arrived at an unknown location, where a few people were gathered outside by a fire. When they saw Li Jia, they greeted him. Li Jia asked, "Where is our big brother?" They noticed the sports car and immediately asked Li Jia if he had just bought it. He proudly boasted, "Oh, just a few million for it." Han Feng was a bit speechless as Li Jia openly bragged about the car in front of the owner. Inside, a tattooed man appeared. "Li Jia, what's going on? Why did you come to me?" Li Jia bowed respectfully and explained, "I have a small matter. My friend here is looking for firearms." The tattooed man looked at Han Feng and scrutinized him for a moment. Han Feng felt a little uneasy, but was relieved when the man simply said, "You're looking for a little firearm and come to me? I thought it was something serious." Han Feng, noticing it was a tiny handgun, politely requested something larger, describing it as a sniper rifle. The tattooed man, hearing this, seemed to think for a moment, causing Han Feng to feel a bit tense. Finally, the man pulled out a Barrett rifle and scolded Han Feng for not being straightforward. "You should have just said you wanted a sniper rifle." Li Jia stepped forward and explained, "My friend has his reasons for needing it. This story dates back 5 years ago. His wife." Wow, Li Jia, this guy, started telling another ridiculous story to the tattooed man. Almost like gossip you'd hear in a market among women. After some explanations, the tattooed man finally believed it. Though still in disbelief, he slammed his fist on the table and said, "Those 3 kids aren't even his? That's disgusting." Han Feng felt speechless. Li Jia was really something else. The tattooed man then assured Han Feng that he would definitely help him. But it would take a few more days. Han Feng thanked him. The tattooed man then instructed his subordinates to check if they could find any automatic firearms, preferably with more ammunition. Li Jia, proudly bragging, said to Han Feng, "I work fast. Don't worry." The tattooed man handed Han Feng a small handgun and said, "Take this. It's a gift for you." Han Feng was surprised at how kind the tattooed man was. Han Feng then told him that he had heard from government sources that the extreme weather would last for a while, and supplies would be limited. It was best to stock up while they still could. The tattooed man looked at him skeptically, and Han Feng broke out in a cold sweat. "I understand," the tattooed man said after a moment. "Thanks for the warning." Not long after, Han Feng and Li Jia were on their way back. To show his gratitude, Han Feng said he would buy Li Jia some cigarettes. Li Jia waved it off, saying, "No need for that, but if you were buying, make sure to get the Wazi brand. It's the kind that doesn't make me cough." Han Feng, however, was lost in thought, thinking about what else needed preparation for the coming apocalypse. He needed to study his superpower more. Solving the food issue was critical for surviving the end of the world. Lost in thought, Han Feng tripped over a rock and fell flat on his face. Li Jia, seeing this, rushed over and asked, "Are you okay?" Han Feng groaned in pain, saying, "I think I've broken a bone." He handed Li Jia his car keys, asking him to take him to the hospital. But Li Jia scratched his head and said, "I don't have a driver's license, so I can't drive." Han Feng, feeling frustrated, replied, "Fine, just get me a taxi. I have money." At the hospital, doctors and nurses were busy. A nurse looked out the window, commenting on how the snow was piling up outside. Suddenly, an urgent call came for the head nurse, who was needed immediately. After Han Feng got an X-ray, it was confirmed that he had indeed broken a bone. He sat quietly in the waiting area, deep in thought. Li Jia had to leave because of some urgent matters. The hospital was crowded due to the quick drop in temperature, which had caused a surge of patients, leading to an overflow in the emergency room. Han Feng sat there for what felt like forever, wondering when it would be his turn. Just then, something caught his attention: the head nurse. She was busy directing the other nurses, and Han Feng couldn't help but admire her. She was so young and already a head nurse. Not only was she skilled, but she also had a great attitude toward patients. She was very beautiful. Han Feng couldn't help but think, "She's so unaware," though, as he glanced at her. At that moment, the old man sitting next to him spoke up, calling the head nurse over. She quickly approached him and asked if he needed any help. The old man complained of back pain and then tried to discreetly take out his phone to snap a picture. The naive nurse, still smiling, said, "We'll need to do an X-ray to determine the cause of the pain." But the old man wasn't done. "The pain is right here," he said, moving his hand toward her. Just as he was about to make a move, something flew through the air, knocking the old man to the ground. Han Feng quickly apologized, saying it was his first time using crutches. And that's why the phone went flying. He picked up the old man's phone and asked, "Your phone's not damaged, is it?" The old man panicked, shouting, "Don't touch my phone." Han Feng, unfazed, continued inspecting the phone, which only made the old man angrier. "Give me my phone back," he yelled. Han Feng opened his phone and said to the man, "If you don't want to end up at the police station, you better leave now." Of course, he wasn't going to return the man's phone. If this happened again, he would post about it on TikTok. Hearing this, the man immediately ran out of the hospital, no longer feeling the back pain he had complained about earlier. The naive nurse, still puzzled, asked, "Why did he run off so fast?" "He was just complaining about back pain." Han Feng sighed and explained what had happened to the head nurse. He then handed the phone to her and said, "If you want to delete anything or report it to the police, that's up to you, but next time, be more cautious." She took the phone, thanked him, and said, "I was about to ask you earlier, but I didn't want to seem rude. Is your leg injury serious?" Han Feng began to feel the pain at that moment. A while later, in the treatment room, the head nurse helped Han Feng wrap his injury. He thanked her, relieved that the pain had subsided. She thanked him in return, saying that she wouldn't let any bad people take advantage of her again. Han Feng agreed that it was a good thing. But inside, he thought to himself, she really has no guard up at all. As they were talking, another call came in for the head nurse to attend to another patient. She said goodbye to Han Feng and reminded him to come back for a dressing change in a week. Han Feng left, thinking, maybe we won't see each other again in a week. The next day, the weather forecast was broadcast. Snow continued to fall heavily in major cities, and temperatures were expected to drop even further over the next 24 hours. The reporter also noted that temperatures worldwide were rapidly decreasing. All the experts from the United Nations were discussing it, concluding that the snowstorm wouldn't last much longer. But everyone should stay alert to natural disaster warnings and police arrangements. They hoped people wouldn't panic and should trust the government. The advice was to avoid spreading misinformation and fighting over supplies. Han Feng, sitting at home with a glass of wine, watched the news and sighed. If he hadn't died once, he wouldn't have known that the government was just trying to calm the public with fake information. This time, Han Feng had stocked up on supplies, reinforced his house, and set up heating devices. He took another sip of wine and thought to himself that, for now, he wouldn't have to worry about that. Meanwhile, in a chat group on his phone, the topic of the natural disaster was still being discussed. Unexpectedly, someone messaged, saying, "This isn't a natural disaster. It's the beginning of the Ice Age." Han Feng raised an eyebrow. How did this person know the apocalypse was happening? He began to get a headache. It seemed like he needed to keep an eye on this anonymous person in the group chat. The group continued to argue about the restrictions due to the snow. Someone asked, "Landlords, please respond about the snow restrictions and the inability of vehicles to get out." The building staff apologized, saying the restrictions could not be resolved yet. Han Feng, reading the chat, thought, in a snowstorm like this, human effort is basically useless. Then someone spoke up, "With such heavy snow, even if we clear it, it will cover up again right away. Instead of arguing, why don't we work together to shovel the snow? That way we can get out sooner." The landlord is powerless against this disaster too. A few people disagreed and spoke up angrily. "Who do you think you are? Trying to tell us what to do? Are you the landlord, or are you just helping them out?" The person explained that he wasn't the landlord. But even if he were, it wouldn't matter. "So what should we do now? Should we just wait here and starve?" he said. "Even if the snow in these buildings gets cleared, who's to say the roads outside will be cleared?" Han Feng, reading the chat, thought deeply. He seemed to remember this guy who was making a lot of noise. In his past life, this man was always outspoken and involved in everything. The man then said, "If anyone wants to go outside, let's clear the snow together. Otherwise, stay quiet and stay at home." Many people left the group to go outside and shovel the snow. Someone else also said, "It's just snow shoveling. Why argue about it all day? I'll go help too." Han Feng was hopeful that they would clear the snow quickly. He still had unfinished business, like the hot merchandise deal. Sure enough, not long after, everyone left the chat group to go outside and shovel the snow. On the other side, a girl who looked like the head nurse from earlier also said she would go down to help. Li Wei Na was acting sweet and innocent. "The food in my house was almost gone, so I needed to go out and buy supplies for the next few days." Han Feng wasn't feeling well, But he thought it would be good to get out and set an example as a responsible citizen. It was also an opportunity to check if the roads were clear and if he could pick up his urgent orders. When the guys who were chasing after Li Wei-na heard her speak, they rushed over like eager dogs. "There are some good men here," they said. "How could we let Li Wei-na go down there alone? She should stay home and rest." Then all the men crowded around her. Li Wei-na put on a sweet, innocent expression and thanked them all. Han Feng, however, thought she was overdoing it. The green tea girl, Li Wei-na, then messaged him, saying she hadn't received any gifts from him yet. She also casually mentioned that when he had the chance, he should stop by the supermarket to buy her some food. Since she missed him, after sending the message, she attached a seductive photo to lure him in. With her charm, it would be difficult for him to resist. But Han Feng knew exactly what she was up to. She was just trying to seduce him. It was freezing cold, yet she was dressed so lightly. What a crazy girl. He stretched his leg and sent her a reply. After receiving his response, Li Wei-na seemed a little upset and showed their conversation on her phone. 3 days later, Han Feng was watching pretty girls dancing on TikTok, sighing. At the beginning of the apocalypse, we still had heating and even the internet. He thought, all he could do was scroll through TikTok and watch pretty girls. He didn't know what else to do. But it was only the second day, and he was already feeling frustrated. It seemed the biggest problem in the apocalypse was loneliness. His leg was still injured, so he wasn't feeling optimistic. It would take months for his injury to heal. Then, he watched a science segment on TikTok. The news reported, there is a man in the world who can heal wounds. Doctors confirmed that this man fell from the 15th floor, but his internal organs and bones healed miraculously. Is this real, or just a hoax? Stay tuned for the next episode. Han Feng suddenly recalled something strange about this. He decided to use his blue power on his leg. However, it had no effect. Han Feng sighed and lay down. He had hoped his ability could heal the wound, but it didn't work. Soon after, he fell asleep. In his dream, he imagined himself as the chief of the Mi tribe. However, after that, the old man was knocked over by a goat, causing his leg to break. One of the goats, seeing this, approached Han Feng and began licking his leg. Han Feng found it quite disgusting and pushed the goat away. To his surprise, the goat seemed to enjoy it, extending its long tongue and wrapping it around his leg. Then, a green light appeared around the goat's tongue and Han Feng's leg. At that moment, Han Feng suddenly woke up from the nightmare, confused as to why he had such a strange dream. Looking down at his leg, he noticed the green light slowly fading, and soon his leg was completely healed. He no longer felt any pain in his leg. Han Feng was puzzled, wondering if the green energy he had activated during his sleep had healed the wound. Curiously, he took a small knife and, despite the pain, made a small cut on his hand. The green light reappeared and healed the cut. Indeed, this was one of the miraculous effects of his power. Meanwhile, outside, everyone was busy clearing the snow to open the roads. A man who appeared knowledgeable, named Hu Hawk, spoke up. "Thank you all for your hard work. Even with such heavy snow, we still need your help." The elderly man laughed and replied, "Ha ha, it's all thanks to these two brothers, who have been diligently clearing the snow." While they were talking, a girl stumbled nearby. The twin brothers, Kim Tai-van and Kim Tai-vo, immediately went over to check if she was okay. To their surprise, it was the head nurse who had treated and bandaged Han Feng's leg. She smiled and thanked the two brothers. After confirming she was fine, they bid each other farewell, and she also said goodbye to them. Hu Hawk then told the elderly man, "Lu Kwang-du, you should go buy supplies soon. The snow is getting heavier." Upon hearing the words, "buy supplies," the elderly man seemed to recall something. Hu Hawk, curious, asked him what it was. The elderly man replied, "It's nothing serious, but I heard that one of the households in this building has been buying a lot of stuff. Every day, there's a truck that comes by, almost as if they're moving houses." Hu Hawk responded, "That's normal, maybe they're moving in or renovating their place." However, the elderly man said seriously, "I even saw gas tanks and stoves. This doesn't seem like a typical move. It looks like they're preparing for winter." At that moment, the twin brothers told the elderly man that he could go buy supplies now. The elderly man thanked them for their hard work in clearing the snow. "I'll go buy them right away," he said, but then, someone approached and asked, "Who's preparing for winter here? This sounds interesting." As soon as he finished speaking, a snowball was thrown at him. It was Lu Yen. Hu angrily told the gossiping man. Go back to work. The elderly man, hearing this, pointed at her and said angrily. You're the lazy one. We've been working non-stop while you're just pretending to be busy. Hu Hawk, seeing everyone argue, sighed. The roads are clear now. So everyone should just do what they need to do and stop arguing. Hearing this, Tak Hong smiled. Finally, we can go buy supplies. The two brothers quickly messaged their mother to ask what supplies they needed. The elderly man, standing beside them, asked Hu Hawk, do you think the fact that one of the households is stocking up on supplies is related to this disaster? Hu Hawk, pretending not to know, replied, I don't think so. It's just a short snowstorm. It'll stop soon, and life will return to normal. It's nothing serious. The elderly man adjusted his glasses and said, even if the snow doesn't stop, isn't it a good thing for us if one household is stocking up on supplies? The elderly man chuckled, thinking it was just a joke. You young people are really smart. Meanwhile, the snow continued to fall heavily. Hu Hawk spoke up again, urging everyone to line up and buy supplies. Try to come back in no more than 3 hours. The snow is getting thicker. Everyone then started heading to the supermarket to buy supplies. Only one apartment in the building remained lit. Not caring about the outside world, Han Feng was fast asleep when suddenly, there was a knock on the door. Open the door, little brother. Open the door. Han Feng, groggy, opened the door. Mr. Li, sorry, I was sleeping deeply. Li Jia entered, smiling. You were sleeping so deeply. Didn't you fear the enemies coming? I brought you some goods. Li Jia also thanked Han Feng for reminding him to stock up on supplies. However, Li Jia then mentioned something strange. He said that when he and the others went to a large supermarket today, they were shocked to find that all the goods had been cleared out overnight. Han Feng acted surprised, although he had known this for a while. But even he didn't expect that this had really happened again. This is truly mysterious. After delivering the hot goods, Li Jia said goodbye and went home to warm up. Han Feng closed his door with some suspicion. How could all those supplies have been moved in just one night? He remembered reading some reviews about stories where the male protagonist could absorb all the supplies into his supernatural space. The more he thought about it, the more doubts arose. Could that mutant be to the Nertrong Dick? The thought of meeting such characters created by the author made him feel uneasy. Thus, Han Feng decided to seriously study his superpower again. If there were people with abilities like that, he would need to know how to deal with them. For now, Han Feng knew that his power worked with various types of food. He could survive by using it, but the success rate was very low. For instance, it took 10 attempts to turn a soybean into food. Meat was even harder to succeed with. Han Feng continued to use his power, but he still didn't know how to control it. Suddenly, there was a loud boom. A soybean exploded right in front of him. As expected, it was another failure. Han Feng felt frustrated. With such a high failure rate, how long would it take to improve? He squeezed a piece of coal in his hand, determined to master this power. Before long, it was almost 11 p.m., and Han Feng finally managed to create a perfect soybean. After numerous failures, he began to understand it a little better. It turned out that when Han Feng used the green light, the energy it emitted was not fixed. Each type of power required different amounts of energy. Also, there was a specific timing for success or failure. Han Feng suddenly realized that this pattern seemed very familiar. It was exactly like the gameplay mechanics of the old game Audition, which was popular among young people in ancient times. Han Feng decided to apply the strategy from the game to his superpower, aligning the energy points in sequence and stopping at the right moment. A few seconds later, he succeeded. He didn't expect that applying game mechanics would help him use his ability. Next, Han Feng decided to try using his power with different kinds of meat. Since meat and vegetables are different types, if the fusion failed, it would turn into a disgusting black sludge. Han Feng had prepared a bunch of chicken drumsticks and soybeans. He figured their operating principles should be similar. First, he identified the energy needed for the meat. The process seemed to take longer than with vegetables. This game would be a bit harder. Sure enough, he failed. The chicken drumsticks and soybeans turned into black sludge. Han Feng continued trying, unsure how many times he had failed. But overall, it was just one failure after another. At this point, he needed to stay calm because he was running low on materials. And his efforts hadn't yielded any success yet. He continued playing the game in the virtual world, applying his skills to perfect the process. Just at the critical moment between success and failure, 1 second later, A miracle happened. The small chicken drumstick suddenly grew large in front of Han Feng. Exhausted but satisfied, Han Feng lay back in contentment. Finally, he had found a successful method for transforming meat. The next morning, the snow outside showed no signs of stopping. Han Feng had used so much of his power that he fell asleep without realizing it. The TV was still broadcasting news about the frost disaster. Due to the heavy snowfall, the energy system had been affected. The government was quickly working on repairs and was distributing supplies to affected areas. Han Feng woke up, but there was no surprise. Everything was happening just like the life he had experienced before. He checked his phone and saw that the chat group had started arguing again. This time, the argument was even more intense than before. It seemed everyone had watched the news earlier, which had left them confused. At that moment, someone spoke up. Do you all really believe the news on TV? It was Lu Kuang-du. He said, if everything were really fine as the news reports, the rescue teams would have already arrived. But we haven't seen any sign of them. On the contrary, I heard that many tanks and heavy weapons are heading towards City Aso. There's only one possibility. War is coming. Everyone broke out in a cold sweat upon hearing this. After a brief silence, they rushed to ask the elderly man if this was true. Han Feng was also a bit skeptical because, before his rebirth, he hadn't heard of anything like this. Hu Hak appeared and said, if that's the case, we'll have to protect ourselves. Many families haven't even stocked up on food yet, so they're already starving. We'll need to create our own rescue team before the government can help us. So, Hu Hak suggested that everyone contribute some of their food supplies and distribute them evenly among the households. That way, everyone would have enough to eat. He also mentioned that it would start at his house, and anyone in need could come to him. The others found the idea of donating supplies a bit unusual, so they began discussing it. This guy, who had been eavesdropping, then spoke up and agreed with Hu Hak. In such cold weather, they needed to help each other get through it. Count me in, he said, pointing at Li Wei Na. You should contribute a little too. When Li Wei Na heard her name, she became irritated. Why ask me, with so many people around? Perhaps it was because she had previously refused to become his girlfriend. She then put on a fake expression, claiming that her house had no supplies left. The people from other households also started discussing it among themselves. Eventually, they all agreed to donate supplies. Seeing this, Hu Hak thanked them on behalf of everyone. Since there weren't many people, he suggested they elect someone to be in charge. They would establish a temporary emergency committee to manage and distribute supplies. Han Feng found this situation quite interesting. Something similar had happened before his rebirth, but it was a scam to steal supplies. The next day, the temperature dropped to -40 degrees Celsius, and the heating system completely failed due to the extreme weather. Everyone had to find a way to keep their body temperature stable. However, Han Feng remained warm, not only because of his abundant coal supply but also because he had fresh water and cake for dessert. He spent the entire day at home eating and playing games. Even royalty couldn't have it better than him. While playing, he received a phone call. Hello, is this household 1801? I'm the person in charge. Please prepare to come downstairs and clear the path. Meet me in the parking lot. Han Feng was annoyed. The snow outside was deep. How could they clear it all? But he still had to go down. He couldn't afford to let the neighbors get suspicious and had to minimize the chances of them discovering the secrets in his room. The snow in front of his door was piled so high it covered the entrance. No one expected the snow to be several meters deep. I'm almost 70 years old, and I've never seen anything like this. A man pointed to him and told the others to help. The three of them went together to push the door open. As soon as the door was opened, a gust of cold wind rushed in, making everyone shiver. Han Feng, who had been warm inside, nearly suffered from thermal shock. He cursed to himself, in this weather, if I go outside, I'll probably freeze to death. The older men behind him were also shivering. They said only a madman would go outside in such cold. Just then, a familiar voice caught Han Feng's attention. It was, as expected, Ja. The Lord is putting on a show. The destroyer is a faker. The god of the chicken herd is here. Watching the others shivering, he added, as men, we must be tough. Someone nearby heard this and told Li Jia not to be ridiculous. In weather this cold, we can only wait for the snow to stop. Li Jia took a puff of his cigarette to warm up, then opened the door and charged outside, shouting, everyone move, let me show you how it's done. He was the only one digging through the snow, leaving everyone stunned. After a while, he vanished. and soon his voice could be heard calling for help. Fortunately, the others managed to pull him back inside and shut the door. He was now completely frozen. Even his private parts had to be pried out with tweezers. Han Feng thought it best to go to the parking lot in the basement to meet the person in charge. Once the snow stopped, he would think of something. Looking around, the whole area was buried under snow. It was no longer possible to rely on manual labor to clear it. Hu Hawk, down in the basement, heard what the others were saying and declared that cleaning would happen once the snow stopped. The parking lot would be the place to donate and distribute supplies. Han Feng finally met his grandfather Hu Hawk in person. It turned out that the emergency committee scam was led by him. Surprised by how much they had donated, he said this would help many families in need. And everyone agreed. Every household will face difficulties. Helping each other is the right thing to do. As long as we unite, we will get through this disaster. Han Feng just thought to himself. This disaster isn't over yet. Soon, everyone will regret providing supplies. After recovering, Li Jia said goodbye to Han Feng and went upstairs to rest. As Han Feng was walking, he noticed a familiar figure. It was Nurse Trong's younger sister, who was bringing supplies to donate. The crowd was so crowded that she tripped and fell. Fortunately, Han Feng rushed over to catch her. Are you okay? The nurse looked surprised to see Han Feng there. How did your leg heal so quickly? Han Feng was caught off guard. He explained that he had always had a rapid recovery ability since he was young. A little fall, and I'm fine in a few days. The nurse couldn't believe the fake story Han Feng had told her. But she was excited because she didn't expect him to be so capable. Han Feng, being gentlemanly, helped her carry the boxes. However, he didn't expect the boxes to be so heavy. Not understanding, he asked, "What's in here that makes them so heavy?" She replied, "Just some necessary medical supplies I brought to donate to everyone. Are they too heavy? If you want, I can carry them myself." Since Han Feng had already taken the initiative to carry the boxes, he couldn't let the girl do it. The nurse told him not to force himself, as her strength was greater than many men's. Han Feng then asked, "Have you always been this strong since you were little?" The nurse answered, "Not really. There were a few reasons behind it. But it's a long story." She then asked his name. "I'm Han Feng," he replied. "I'm Kim Tuyet." She introduced herself. "Nice to meet you, Han Feng." She was curious about his job. So Han Feng told her he was unemployed, which caused her to gasp in surprise. Han Feng didn't understand why being unemployed would cause such a reaction. As they were walking and talking, someone accidentally bumped into Kim Tuyet, causing her to stumble and fall towards Han Feng. At that moment, he felt her body press against his. Both of them blushed. Kim Tuyet quickly apologized, but Han Feng reassured her that it was fine. Just as they were laughing and chatting, Li Wei Na, the green tea girl, appeared. "Han Feng, why didn't you tell me you were going out?" she said, running over to hug Han Feng's arm. "Is Kim Tuyet your friend?" Kim Tuyet, thinking Li Wei Na was Han Feng's girlfriend, decided to leave and not disturb them anymore. Han Feng then asked why Li Wei Na had come downstairs. She said she was there to collect supplies. Han Feng hadn't contacted her, so she had been worried something had happened to him. Han Feng pretended to scratch his head and said, "I was about to message you." Actually, Li Wei Na played along, saying, "You have a girlfriend now, so why would you care about me?" She then cheerfully asked, "Does your house have any leftover food? Ours is almost gone. Could you spare some for me?" Han Feng sneered, "I have a little left at home. I was planning to share some with you, but I haven't received a reply to the last message I sent." Han Feng then leaned in close to Li Wei Na and said, "Just wait a few more days." Feeling cornered, Li Wei Na quickly pulled away and explained that she hadn't understood his intentions before. She said if he wanted to talk to her, he could just text her. Han Feng turned away abruptly. "It seems you're not agreeing, so I guess I'll just head home then." Li Wei Na grabbed Han Feng's sleeve and said, "You've changed." She then became very serious, saying that she didn't want people to think she was only after Han Feng for his money. "Give me some time," she added, pouting. Han Feng, seeing her green tea act, couldn't help but sigh. If he hadn't already fallen for her tricks before, he might have actually believed her. But now, he was eager to tear off her mask. Still, he knew he needed to figure out who was behind all of this. He smiled and said he was just joking with her, which caught her off guard. Han Feng said he would wait for her response and would bring the supplies the next day. Li Wei Na, feeling that she had achieved her goal, waved goodbye and left. As soon as she was gone, she flashed a sinister smile. Han Feng also smiled, pleased with the trap he had set for her. 2 days later, Han Feng received a message from Li Weina. She asked why, after 2 days, he still hadn't brought the supplies to her. Meanwhile, Han Feng was enjoying a hot bowl of beef noodles. He didn't have the time to cater to her demands. Han Feng was eating while reflecting on the superpower experiments he had conducted over the past few days. He had confirmed 2 things. First, meats could not grow infinitely. Just like beans, meat could be reused indefinitely. Previously, when creating bean sprouts, he needed a few bean seeds, and the remaining seeds would be eaten. He applied the same principle to meat, with the combined effect of 2 types of light and meat and beans. He could create a complete piece of meat. Then, he only needed to eat half. Just like before, after multiple experiments, the results turned out exactly as Han Feng had predicted. Now, with just 1 bean and 1 piece of meat, he could create an infinite amount of food without worrying about running out. At this moment, the news on TV reported a natural disaster. An island had been completely frozen, with temperatures dropping to -44 degrees Celsius. The seawater had also frozen at a noticeable rate. Experts estimated the ice layer to be 55 centimeters thick. Different areas were experiencing different levels of the disaster. Han Feng watched the news, already knowing that the situation was far worse than what was being reported. As he was drinking wine, a loud explosion suddenly startled him. This was the 7th explosion he had heard outside. He had no idea what had happened. There were many military helicopters flying in the sky. Han Feng felt a sense of worry. The situation outside was also causing panic among the residents. In the underground shelter, people were exchanging essential supplies. But some individuals were taking advantage of the situation to pressure others. Eventually, disputes and conflicts broke out. Suddenly, an announcement was made that residents facing difficulties could go to the basement to collect supplies. Han Feng decided to go down to check the situation. Even though the weather outside was extremely cold, if it weren't for wanting to see if anything new had occurred, he wouldn't have bothered. He remembered the previous riot here. But at that time, he didn't know what had caused it. This time, he had to go down to get a clear understanding of the situation and minimize potential risks. As he descended, he saw many families in need. Up ahead, an argument was taking place. A man was saying he had contributed several boxes of supplies but had received very little in return. The elderly man angrily demanded that the supplies be returned. However, Hu Hawk argued that once supplies had been donated, they could not be taken back. Everything needed to be distributed equally. He tried to convince the elderly man, hoping he would think about the bigger picture. After the disaster passed, everyone would be compensated. The people behind started berating the elderly man for being selfish. You've already donated, and now you want it back? Do you have any shame? Fat guy, just leave. Han Feng stood to the side, chuckling softly. Indeed, once supplies had been donated, they couldn't be reclaimed, but it was shameless to stand on some high moral ground and pressure others to donate more. Beside him, Mr. Li Jia also sighed. How shameless. Han Feng realized that it was Mr. Li Jia, who had also come down to collect supplies. He decided to start a conversation with him and asked how he had been. Mr. Li Jia smiled and said he was doing fine, though his body still felt a little weak and tired. Han Feng thought he seemed to be doing well enough. However, Li Jia clutched his stomach and said that recently, he had been drinking tap water to suppress his hunger. Han Feng was surprised and asked if he had run out of supplies. Li Jia explained that he had given away all his supplies to help his neighbors. And now his house had nothing left. While the disaster was still ongoing, the supply committee had only distributed a small amount. Li Jia angrily said that if he had known this would happen, he would have kept more supplies for himself. Hearing this, Han Feng decided to offer him a deal. Li Jia sighed and said, if you could give me 4 boxes of instant noodles and 2 sausages, I won't complain. I have a little bit of supplies left. But I hope it's not too little. Li Jia was so moved that he almost cried from the cold. I will never forget your kindness. We are brothers. Don't be so formal. He hugged Han Feng and promised to complete whatever task was asked of him. Then, Mr. Li Jia went off to work. Han Feng thought to himself that in this society, you only get to eat if you work. Expecting food without doing anything was absurd. Han Feng felt that by giving just a few boxes of noodles and sausages, he had helped Li Jia. He wouldn't need to gather any more intelligence. Although he felt a little guilty, he still thought that lying on the sofa and playing video games would be more fun. On his way back, a hand suddenly swung in front of his face. It turned out to be Li Wei-na, who was furious. She ran up and slapped him. Then, she said she was very disappointed in him. She asked why Han Feng hadn't replied to her messages. Han Feng stood there, stunned, not expecting her to slap him. In his previous life, Han Feng hadn't even had the chance to settle the score. Now, this person dared to show up and slap him in the face. Han Feng was starting to get really frustrated. Did they really think he was someone who could be easily bullied? Li Wei-na stood in front of him, scolding him as though he were deaf. Han Feng sighed deeply. He had to control himself because he couldn't make a move with so many people around. Sorry Li Wei-na, let me explain. All my supplies were stolen, Han Feng said. When Li Wei-na heard this, she immediately asked if he had found anything yet. Han Feng responded that he hadn't found any leads. She then asked if he still had any supplies left. Han Feng said that he didn't have much. He only ate 1 meal a day, so he could survive a few more days. Li Wei-na, without any shame, said, if you only eat once every 2 days, you can share half of it with me. I'll help you get through this disaster. Han Feng was taken aback by how shameless she was. But then again, in his previous life, he was nothing more than a fool, a tool for Li Wei-na whenever she needed him. Han Feng reluctantly agreed to her request, telling her that he would message her later that night. Li Wei-na happily agreed and left, saying goodbye as if everything was perfectly normal. Han Feng sneered, I'll be waiting for you tonight, darling. That evening, Li Wei-na sent a bunch of messages to Han Feng, but he didn't reply. She angrily thought to herself that Han Feng had left her hanging again. She called him, but he didn't answer. The elevator had stopped, so she couldn't use it to go up to his floor. She had no choice but to walk up on foot. If it weren't for the supplies, she wouldn't have bothered looking for him. By the time she had climbed a few floors, she was already out of breath. When she reached the upper floors, she noticed the emergency lights weren't on, which made her feel uneasy. Suddenly, she heard a noise and nervously asked, "Who's there?" Just as she spoke, something fell in front of her. She immediately cursed Han Feng's name. Han Feng appeared, apologizing. "I saw your messages and came down. But when the lights went out, I bumped into the railing and dropped a packet of flour on your head." Li Wei-na was stunned. She angrily scolded Han Feng, saying that even such a simple task was too much for him. Han Feng chuckled to himself, pleased with the outcome. This was exactly what he had planned for her. He then handed her his supplies. When she opened the bag, she was shocked to find that it was just a bunch of discarded food. It had been sitting there for who knows how long and had already turned moldy. Han Feng said, "I had to eat very sparingly to still have these leftovers." Li Wei-na was furious. "How can I eat this?" she exclaimed. Han Feng replied, "If you don't want it, then return it to me." But Li Wei-na, desperate, said she didn't mind. "Even if it's garbage, I'll still eat it," she replied. She also asked for the packet of flour that had fallen on her. Luckily, half of it hadn't spilled out. Han Feng watched as she took the flour, thinking to himself that this garbage would likely make her sick for a few days. With the cold weather, she wouldn't even be able to shower. She'd have to walk around with flour stuck to her. It seemed like Han Feng was playing a clever game. As he was about to leave, Han Feng noticed someone was watching him. He quickly hid and waited for the person to show themselves. When the person appeared, Han Feng subdued them effortlessly. To his surprise, it was just a little girl, looking innocent and cute. Han Feng asked her why she was following him and whether she had some hidden agenda. But the girl didn't speak. Han Feng threatened her, saying, "If you don't talk, I'll make you." However, the girl, with her purple hair, still remained silent, her expression unchanged. Han Feng eventually gave up and decided to let it go. "If you don't want to speak, then fine, but next time, I won't be so lenient," he warned. He told her to go home and stop causing trouble. But then, the little girl suddenly grabbed his hand, making him freeze in confusion. She gestured for him to follow her to her house. Han Feng, still puzzled, asked if she was leading him somewhere. The little girl nodded and led him there. When they entered her room, Han Feng was shocked. He hadn't expected the girl to have stockpiled supplies. He asked her if she had known the disaster was coming. She nodded and explained that it was all part of her calculations. "The result is the Ice Age," she said casually. She added that she had even discussed it in a group chat. Han Feng then realized that the person who had mentioned the apocalypse in the group earlier was this girl. He couldn't help but admire her for being so resourceful. But he was still confused about why she had brought him here to say all of this. The girl simply pointed, leaving him to wonder what her intentions were. After that, the screen showed Han Feng preparing his supplies. Everything he did was being observed and recorded by the little girl. Han Feng and his grandfather were both startled. Could it be that the little girl had been monitoring him all along? The girl stood aside, removing some of the items, and said, Han Feng was shocked and told her not to make such a move. However, the girl replied, saying that it was too hot. A while later, the two of them were sitting on the sofa, and Han Feng asked her, "So, did you see the snowfall? And then saw me stockpiling supplies. So you decided to monitor me in order to cooperate?" The little girl just nodded. Then, unexpectedly, she crawled over to where Han Feng was sitting and seemed like she wanted to do something. Han Feng blushed when he saw her in such a posture. It felt as though his younger self, who would have used tweezers to look up at her, was now able to raise his head. The girl suddenly turned to Han Feng and asked him to teach her how to use a generator. Han Feng, a bit disappointed, showed her how to use it. After listening, the girl looked at him, which made him feel somewhat suspicious. Then she pointed to the opposite side. Han Feng continued to show her how to use a certain machine. He even had to teach her how to store meat in the freezer. He couldn't just throw the whole box in there. Then, he also guided her on how to use the gas safely. Han Feng even cooked the food himself, which felt surreal. However, he had to admit that the little girl's house had been very well equipped with machinery and supplies. Just like his own. Soon, some delicious dishes were ready. Han Feng and the little girl sat at the table and began to eat. However, Han Feng felt a bit strange. How did he suddenly become a babysitter? This was truly illogical. The little girl looked at him curiously. He had no choice but to retract his words, saying that he was just joking. After finishing the meal, Han Feng returned home. The next morning, the snowstorm still hadn't stopped. Han Feng opened the door and asked, "Who's there? It's so early. What's going on?" The little girl with purple hair was standing there, holding a large amount of supplies, which surprised him. "So many supplies?" he asked. "Is there anything else?" The little girl pointed to the generator and asked Han Feng to teach her how to use it once again. After spending a few days with the little girl, Han Feng came to a conclusion. She was a true weeba, a term for anime fans. She lacked many basic skills, but she was eager to learn them. Every day, she would drag Han Feng to her house to teach her. Indeed, after seeing the food she cooked, Han Feng couldn't help but feel it was quite unappetizing. However, there was some improvement. Even though these were basic dishes, many people outside would still be fighting over them. And on normal days, without the apocalypse, even a dog wouldn't eat such food. At this point, Han Feng still didn't know her name. So he asked her, but the girl, who was a weeba, answered, "Ta Vong Chan Nyan Su." Han Feng, hearing that, just sighed and decided not to ask any further. Meanwhile, in the parking lot downstairs, there was a commotion. Everyone was fighting for supplies. It became more and more intense. And at this point, morality had become irrelevant. The man named Hu Hak, seeing everyone fighting, sounded the horn, causing an unbearable noise. He then yelled at them to stop, saying that fighting over supplies was shameful. "Isn't it ridiculous to fight over something as trivial as supplies?" he scolded. Someone shouted at him, "You're the one who came up with the idea of donating supplies. Our family has only received a single pack of instant noodles for days. That's all." "Exactly. If we don't fight for them, we'll starve," another person added. Hu Hak paused for a moment, thinking, then replied, "Because there isn't enough food. Fewer people have been donating supplies. So, we had to take it by force. Right?" He chuckled lightly. "Is that so? What you're saying is really funny." Then, Hu Hak boldly declared, "You all deserve to starve to death." Hearing this, the people in front of him became furious. One man shouted back, "Think about who is really to blame for this situation." Hu Hak grabbed a piece of bread and said, "Everyone, think back to what this piece of bread used to cost. It was only a few coins. Yet it was inflated by some profiteers to dozens or even hundreds of times its original price. And they broke it into smaller portions. They made a fortune from this disaster." He continued, "Not only have you spent money on this food and drained your wallets, but you've also fought each other for it. Isn't this a laughable situation?" Those who hoarded supplies and didn't donate them are the ones to blame. If it weren't for them, we wouldn't be in this position. At this point, Hoo-hawk began to stir up the crowd, rallying them with words of anger. It's those profiteers who pushed up the price of supplies. In the end, it's us who starved to death. Isn't this fair? Shouldn't we unite now? The crowd began to murmur. Should we go upstairs and take back the supplies that belong to us? Someone asked. He's right, another person added. It's not fair. We need to take it back. The crowd's excitement grew as they became more determined to steal supplies from others. At that moment, Hoo-hawk smiled faintly, having achieved his goal. Meanwhile, Lee Jia was downstairs, carefully monitoring the situation. After realizing what was happening, he quickly messaged Han Feng. These people are out of control. Something big is going to happen. Han Feng, who had been dozing off, received the message. He sat up and read the text from Lee Jia. He was worried when he saw that the crowd was preparing to steal supplies. Lee Jia mentioned that the one stirring up trouble was Hoo-hawk. He also warned Han Feng that if he wanted to leave, now was the time to do so. It would be best not to confront them directly. Han Feng replied, "Be careful." However, he didn't expect things to escalate so quickly. While he had 2 guns to defend himself, if these people acted together, and if his supplies were exposed, he would have to face the crazed neighbors. Looking at his stockpile, he realized they would raid him clean, leaving him with nothing. So, he quickly took some supplies and crafted something. He attached a long wire just outside the door. Soon, the entire room lost power. Not just his room, but the whole building went dark, causing confusion among everyone. The power's out. Have you contacted the building manager yet? The building across from us is out too. People murmured. Han Feng turned on his phone's flashlight and sighed. The building manager has long lost contact. It seems like the signal is down too. He was preparing a generator. The snowstorm had overloaded the heating system, so power outages were inevitable. On top of that, the outside temperature was too harsh to fix anything. Han Feng realized that this power and network cutoff might be permanent. Meanwhile, half an hour earlier, at Li Wei Na's place, she was enjoying a cup of instant noodles while a man sat opposite her. Since the prices of supplies have been raised, we've managed to auction off quite a few, the man said. The older man stroked Li Wei Na's cheek, likely thinking that a box of noodles would win her over. However, the man was still considering ways to inflate the value of supplies. What he didn't realize was that the people were already starting to rise up. Sure enough, just a second later, someone came to inquire. The man, confused, wondered who would show up at this late hour. Outside, people were murmuring, "Is this the house?" "Yes. It's the one that bought supplies from dozens of households and inflated the prices by hundreds of times. Let's break the door down." Immediately after, the sound of loud banging echoed. A minute later, the door was smashed open by the angry crowd. Inside Han Feng's house, everything was scattered as he continued working on something, seemingly constructing an electric door to defend against intruders. The older man, fumbling and unsure what to do, would have been able to look up the solution online if he had internet access. Just then, there was a knock at the door, which made Han Feng feel suspicious. When he looked outside, he was surprised to see the little girl with purple hair. She repeatedly said, "Help." Han Feng sighed. "I'm busy right now, and you come to me?" Just as he was about to open the door, he realized he had been too careless. He wasn't going to let the tragic events of his past life happen again. So, he said, "I've received the news. Everyone has already formed teams to steal supplies. Go home, little one. I'm not opening the door." The girl, hearing this, sat down outside Han Feng's house. Meanwhile, voices could be heard getting closer. "Hurry up, we can't let others steal the supplies before us." The voices grew louder. Outside, people didn't care whose door they were breaking into. They soon reached the hallway where the girl was sitting. It seemed there were no other residents on this floor. The girl was no longer sitting in front of the door. The men noticed that only 2 households had people inside, so they decided to break into those homes next. The next door to be broken into was Han Feng's. Inside, Han Feng had already pulled the girl into hiding, not realizing it until it was too late. Outside, voices were asking, "Hello? We've come to deliver supplies. Is the owner home?" When there was no response, they began breaking the door down. Han Feng and the little girl remained silent inside. Han Feng whispered to the girl, trying to comfort her, "Don't be afraid. The door is reinforced." The girl didn't show any reaction. Just like usual, the people outside couldn't break the door, so they began to give up.